As some people may know, Archer Season 11 was recently released, and although it received mixed reviews, it's proven to be quite a successful series. FX have even renewed Archer for a 12th season in 2021. For those who haven't seen the series, the animated sitcom follows 8 dysfunctional secret agents and is set in a fictional New York around the 1960s to the 1970s. With its dark humour, meta-comedy and rapid-fire dialogue, the show's sustainable formula has lasted at least 10 years since being aired in 2009. The spy parody takes inspiration from the James Bond franchise and constantly pokes fun at the reality of being a spy whilst mocking its cliches. Archer has received loads of positive reviews from critics, alongside being nominated and winning multiple awards. In the first episode, we're introduced to the main protagonist Sterling Archer, who is known as the world's most dangerous spy.
Known from Berlin to Bangkok as the world's most dangerous spy.
His mother Mallory runs an espionage service named ISIS, an abbreviation of International Secret Intelligence Service. This was later changed to the Figgis Agency for obvious reasons. Working as a field agent, Sterling's actions are closely monitored by his mother, and although related, their relationship is complicated. I'll expand on this later. This, alongside 6 other dysfunctional employees, a lot of dialogue humour is generated as the show develops its own sense of dark humour.
Buckle, the thought of me dead gives you an erection?
No, just half of one.
So, if you repeated the same formula, would you have another successful series? As a comparison, Pacific Heat's sitcom is set in the Gold Coast within Australia and follows a police undercover special unit called Pacific Heat. The covert squad is constantly threatened to shut down due to their incompetence and operations outside the law. Having released only 1 season in 2014, Pacific Heat has an overwhelming number of negative reviews from critics claiming that it is either a rip-off of Archer or if Archer wasn't funny. So, why is this? To answer this question, we can analyse the first episode of both series. By only reviewing the pilot episodes, the investigation is balanced, as comparing a single season to 11 seasons creates quite an unjust argument. This way, there will be no advantage of character or story developments throughout the course of the series. Within the first 2 minutes of Archer, Sterling's personality is presented straight away during his simulated interrogation. Not only does he mock the battery that's used to shock him, but he also makes fun of the interrogator's accent. His own mother even mentions that he doesn't take the interrogation seriously.
What, your little go-kart battery?
Golf cart.
Whatever. And would you pick an accent and stick with it?
Listen here, you...
Sterling's playful-like nature makes him quite immature as he lacks responsibility whilst undergoing practices. These characteristics are then contrasted with his disregard for other people's emotions, as he's insensitive about his mother's dog's death.
She wasn't too smart to die from eating chocolate, was she?
Instead, Sterling is more self-centered, with concerns that their codename is Duchess. This just so happens to be the dog's name as well.
Speaking of lame, my code name
Was
is...
chosen at random by the ISIS computer.
Unfazed with his poor performance during the interrogation, Sterling continues his conversation with Crenshaw. His personality comes off as quite arrogant, as he sees everything as a joke. He also mentions Jenga, portraying his childishness whilst having no concept of the reality of how dangerous his profession is.
Needs improvement.
Jesus, Archer.
What?
You think this is a game?
No, I think Jenga's a game.
This childishness ties in with his demand for attention. After being electrocuted, he calls out,
Mother, did you see that? Mother!
He complains with a whining tone, expecting something to happen from his misfortune and to effectively be mothered. This reinforces his dynamic relationship with his mother, as he just insulted her dog and is now expecting her empathy after being shocked. All these dialogue exchanges portray Sterling's dynamic personality. Opposed to this are his handsome, playboy-like appearance, which deceives us as he's not the perfect charismatic agent we see. Within these 2 minutes, the plot is summarised as Crenshaw mentions that Sterling's mum is the boss.
Well, maybe I never get promoted.
And never will.
Because my mommy's not the boss.
Alongside this, Sterling makes humorous remarks on the cliché interrogation, presenting the notion of a spy parody. Now, let's compare this to the characters from Pacific Heat. So, Pacific Heat's characters are quite bizarre as there's no clear protagonist. This establishes a big problem as the audience has no one to follow or feel emotions for. Essentially, there's no main character to drive the story forwards. Although Sterling may be a morally bad person with flaws, it doesn't make the audience hate him.
I'm sure you wouldn't use operational funds for personal expenses.
Instead, we learn to accept his character for who he is since we can't change his personality. And here lies one of the biggest problems with Pacific Heat: lack of personality. You could say there's a bias as I've only analysed the first episode. However, the characters remain like this throughout the entire series. Rather than focus on personality, the characters' dialogue consists of quick gags, one-liners, and repetition.
City, time to put these guys out of business. Clear to proceed. Sorry, no, you go. Yeah, no, you go. And for all.
Not only does this take up space for potential character developments, but all the dialogue quickly becomes tiresome. This creates further problems as the non-stop cheap gags results in the humour being overall weaker. I mean, the character named Zach literally questions everything within the first scene.
We're ready to rock.
Lock and load or rock?
We have eyes up.
What's eyes up?
The niche of being absolute idiots can only carry the series so far. Expanding on personality, having suitable voice actors can make a huge impact on the performance. In fact, celebrities have starred in animated films since the 1990s, and their presence in the industry has gradually increased over time. Examples of this could include Rowan Atkinson as Zaza from The Lion King in 1994, Tom Hanks as Woody from Toy Story in 1995, and Eddie Murphy as Mushu from Mulan in 1998. Coming back to the point, Pacific Heat's cast aren't objectively bad at voice acting. The issue is they are limited to the characters they must impersonate. Archer's cast aren't random celebrities, but rather iconic voices that suit their given identity.
My name is John Benjamin, and my character is Sterling Archer.
Harry John Benjamin's comedic performance complements Sterling's character and gives a contrast to his narcissistic personality. Essentially, the characters are only as good as the script, as voice actors can only emphasise what they are given. A bad script creates a bad story. However, a good script can be turned into a great script with the correct voice actor. Now, you don't have to take my word for all this. I'll just let Archer speak for itself. Okay, get the picture? Good. After understanding Pacific Heat's lack of character personality, we can now analyse its storytelling separately. Being a sitcom, Pacific Heat mainly relies on its dialogue. The story's pacing can be monitored individually, which is where another problem arises. Not only is the communication static, but the episodes feel rushed. The monotone dialogue paired with its consistent pacing creates a very boring story. On the other hand, the speed of the conversations is so fast that most information is lost.
We were given false intel.
Inadequate surveillance of target
There
location.
were so many stairs.
Todd had helmet hair.
All right, Zach.
Are we still playing that blame game?
Alongside people speaking over each other, all communication becomes tedious as the audience must decipher what is being said. The lack of diversity is caused by all the dialogue being rapid with only pauses or moments of silence from scene transitions. This results in the storytelling to be back and forth, making the flow of the story very mundane and predictable. The simple aspect of pacing has such a major impact to the story, as the audience needs time to understand the plot. It also allows characters to acknowledge each other's interactions and to respond appropriately. Despite what critics and articles may say, there are a numerous amount of user reviews that complain that Pacific Heat is not like Archer and that they shouldn't be compared. It's not uncommon for films or series to overlap despite being unaware of one another. This happened with two supervillain films, Megamind and Despicable Me. They were both released in 2010 and had similar storylines that revolved around the perspective of a criminal mastermind. However, neither film was accused of imitating each other. Despite having similar plots, their aesthetics and humour were completely different. So, why is Pacific Heat immediately compared to Archer? Visually, the aesthetics are quite similar between the two sitcoms. They can be categorised under the spy parody genre, and both revolve around a group of agents that are incompetent at their job. Their character designs have thick tapering outlines and are constructed as 2D puppets. Although the joke timings may be different, they both use dark humour for their comedy, so despite what reviews may say, it's no surprise why they are compared to each other. However, it seems that Archer set quite a high standard since many of its smaller details have been focused on. This consists of basing the characters off real people, using live action references to guide the animation, and the use of 2D characters with 3D backgrounds and assets. Hypothetically, if both series were released at the same time, Pacific Heat would still be criticised for its lack of quality. It lacks basic attention to detail, such as simple lip syncing.
I'm not riding on there, boys. Can't you see I'm busy? They're heavy dudes. I swear you don't want to mess with these people.
Archer excels in this aspect and creates a more immersive experience for the audience. An example of this could be their effective use of sound design dependent on the environment. During a driving scene, you can hear the audio change tone when inside a car.
The starry shining path, this guy I know named Popeye.
Simple atmosphere adjustments like this engage the viewer and make them feel like their surroundings are genuine. It can also make boring dialogue scenes more dynamic and add realism to the experience. For my conclusion, there are many factors to take into consideration before I can make a verdict. From my investigation, I believe that Pacific Heat wasn't very successful in general, regardless of being compared to Archer or not. Although Archer was released first, it didn't hinder the animated sitcom's potential to become a good series. One of Australia's favourite film and television critics named Jim Flanagan did a review with Skipper TV, a VOD service on YouTube. From his review, I agree with him on several points and I've made a theory on why Pacific Heat could have failed. Pacific Heat was created by Working Dog Productions, which are described as one of the most successful Australian comedic content makers. Jim goes as far as naming them hugely influential in Australian culture.
Hugely influential in Australian culture over the last 20 years.
The production company have made numerous comedy shows, one award-winning example being Utopia, which received positive reviews from IMDb. It's clear to see that they can create successful live-action shows. However, Pacific Heat was their first animated sitcom. It was also Australia's first fully animated prime-time adult animation series. It could be possible that Working Dog Productions lacked the experience of creating animated series. Given the fact that Working Dog is still producing a comedy series and game show, it could be argued that their expertise is on live-action shows. The company could have prioritised their successful television programs and underestimated the difficulties in creating animated sitcoms. Netflix even bought the rights to Utopia, which demonstrates the capability of Working Dog Productions. It's not necessarily wrong of them to concentrate on their more successful shows, as they will be most profitable. However, this could have caused them to neglect Pacific Heat, since Jim mentions his disappointment of how rushed and lazy their voice work seemed, and that it just sounds really rushed.
It just sounds really rushed, and that their heart just isn't in it at all.
These claims make me think Pacific Heat could have been underdeveloped, which might explain the lack of character personality and story I discovered earlier. Underdevelopments can be caused by restricted budgets, short deadlines, or inexperience, so it's quite hard to pinpoint what the main problem was. Jim also claims that something seemingly has gone very wrong in production, which supports my lack of development argument.
Something seemingly has gone very wrong in production.
There's also a possibility that Working Dog Productions have heavily relied on their humour to drive Pacific Heat, almost treating it like a gimmick. This can become quite problematic, especially since Australian humour can be very different to British and American humour. My final verdict on Pacific Heat is that there was potential for it to succeed, however there wasn't enough time spent developing the show. Archer had set such a high standard of what animated sitcoms could become, creating big expectations from viewers, only for them to be disappointed. It's not uncommon or wrong for production companies to make bad choices or mistakes, but hopefully Working Dog have learned from this experience and gained more understanding of how to create animated sitcoms.